Bonjour tout le monde. Je
Hello,
suis
everyone.
très heureux d'être
I am
ici
very
ce matin
pleased to be
en
here
compagnie de la
today,
ministre
accompanied
Annan,
by Minister
du
Annan,
Major Général
Major
Fortin
General
et de la
Fortin,
Dr Tam et du
and Dr.
Dr New.
Tam and Dr. New.
Before I get started, I want to address the news we got last night that Master Sailor Dwayne Earle of the HMCS Winnipeg is believed to have gone overboard in the Pacific. As Minister Sajjan has said, we are dedicating every resource to the search. To Master Sailor Earle's family and loved ones, we're keeping you in our thoughts during this incredibly difficult time. And to everyone aboard HMCS Winnipeg, we are standing with you. I know that this has already been a very challenging year for those serving in the Canadian Armed Forces. This morning, I just came from visiting the Ottawa Hospital. I spoke to nurses, doctors, and staff about delivering vaccine doses. I also thanked them for their outstanding work, day in, day out, throughout the months of this pandemic, for everything they're doing to keep us and our loved ones safe. C'était un grand plaisir pour moi ce matin.
It was a great pleasure for me this morning to go to the Ottawa Hospital to meet with the frontline workers and to thank them directly for all the incredible work that they've been doing. We are seeing the end with the arrival of vaccines, but there remains a lot of work to be done to make sure that Canadians are safe over the next few months. I know that they'll continue to be there for us.
On Sunday night, the very first doses of a COVID-19 vaccine arrived in Canada. Less than 24 hours later, vaccinations had already started for the most vulnerable and frontline workers. This morning, I have even more good news to share. I can announce that Canada has secured our second agreement for early doses of COVID-19 vaccines. Canada is now contracted to receive up to 168,000 doses of the Moderna COVID-19 vaccine before the end of December, pending Health Canada approval. These doses are part of the guaranteed 40 million doses we have secured from Moderna, and deliveries could begin within 48 hours of regulatory approval. Like the co-founder of Moderna pointed out a few weeks ago, Canada was among the very first to pre-order their vaccine. That, combined with our solid plan for vaccine rollout, is why we have an agreement for early doses. As with the early shipments of the Pfizer vaccine, this moves us even further forward on getting Canadians protected as quickly as possible. The regulatory process for the Moderna vaccine is ongoing, but again, I want to assure Canadians that any vaccine approved in Canada will be both safe and effective. I am
pleased to announce today that Canada has reached a second agreement to receive early doses of vaccine against COVID-19. This agreement foresees the delivery of 168,000 doses of the Moderna COVID-19 before the end of December. These doses are part of the 40 million doses agreed to with Moderna. Delivery could begin 48 hours after regulatory approval, as it was the case for the Pfizer vaccine. This news means that we can make further progress to protect Canadians. The approval process is still underway for the approval of the Moderna vaccine. Once again, I would like to reassure Canadians, every vaccine approved in Canada is safe and effective.
No one and no community will be left behind. We have a plan to reach everyone who wants a vaccine, no matter where they live. Of course, shipping in the winter, especially to the far north, isn't without its challenges. The Moderna vaccine does not need some of the extra special handling requirements of the one from Pfizer, including ultra-cold freezers, and that makes it a better option to ship over long distances to more remote areas. So doses of this vaccine will be directed to the north, as well as to remote and Indigenous communities. The territories are scheduled to receive doses of the Moderna vaccine in the coming weeks, pending Health Canada approval. We're working to ensure the logistics planning is ready when vaccines are available and have already shipped medical-grade freezers to the north. As soon as we get the green light, we'll be ready to go. On Pfizer, I also have an update to share. We've now confirmed that next week we will receive about 200,000 of our total early doses from Pfizer. As well, we will have 70 sites ready to administer these doses, up from 14 sites this week. À propos de Pfizer, je peux aussi partager d'autres nouvelles. Nous avons maintenant
As to
confirmé que
Pfizer,
la semaine
I
prochaine,
have an
nous
update to share.
recevrons
We have now
200,000
confirmed that next week
faisant partie
we will
du
receive about
total prévu
200,000 of our
avec
total
Pfizer.
early
De
doses
plus,
from
nous aurons
Pfizer.
70
As well,
sites de
we will have
vaccination pour ces
70
doses,
sites ready to
donc
administer
56
these
de plus
doses,
que
so
cette semaine.
56 more than this week.
Le Canada a maintenant des ententes pour
Canada has now
recevoir
agreements to receive up to 417,000 early doses before January the 1st. I would like to thank Minister Anand for her incredible leadership in this file. I would like to highlight the remarkable work that has been done by Major General Fortin, his team, and all the employees of public health to ensure that this vaccine rollout is done. This is a pan-Canadian effort. Our government will continue to work jointly with provinces and territories through the intermediary of the National Operations Centre to make sure that doses will be distributed to citizens as quickly as possible. As I announced during the Premier's meeting last week, the federal government will cover 100% of the cost of these vaccines and necessary equipment. Vaccines will be free for Canadians. Provinces and territories won't have to delve into their budgets to pay for vaccine costs.
Vaccines, we're also continuing to invest in treatments for COVID-19. Today, I can announce that we are providing up to $6.7 million for the Canadian company Arch BioPartners to support the development of their leading drug candidate to treat severe cases of COVID-19. This new funding was provided on the advice of Canada's leading experts in the field who are serving on our COVID-19 therapeutics task force. Progress on made-in-Canada treatments, a second agreement for early delivery of vaccine doses, the most vulnerable already starting to receive these life-saving shots. This is the good news we all needed. This pandemic will end. We will get through this. But for now, we need to be incredibly careful. Keep each other safe. Keep your grandparents safe. Keep our doctors and nurses safe. Do the things you know that are going to help us get through this long winter. Vaccines are coming. Vaccines are already here. But we need to make it through this winter in the best possible situation without seeing more tragedies, without seeing more losses. That means we all have to do our part. Nos premiers vaccins sont en train d'arriver.
Our first vaccines are arriving. Now is not the time to gather over the holidays. We have to be careful and continue with our efforts. Keep distance. Wear a mask. Use the COVID Alert app. Avoid gatherings. Wash your hands frequently. Continue to do all that we have to do to protect one another. This has been a very long year, 2020. But in 2021, we will be able to celebrate together when this pandemic will finally be over. We can see the end. We see the end with vaccines, but we still have to remain careful. We still have to do everything in our power, everything we know that we need to do to protect our loved ones.
Is protecting Canadians. That's why we've been working around the clock on procuring everything from PPE to rapid tests to safe, effective vaccines. But let's remember, this is a global pandemic. To end COVID-19 anywhere, we have to end it everywhere. Pour se débarrasser rapidement de la COVID-19, il faut que les gens
to rapidly get rid of COVID-19, everyone has to have access to vaccines as quickly as possible. Yesterday, Ministers Gould and Anand announced that Canada would invest a supplementary amount of $485 million in a worldwide cooperation to accelerate access to tools to fight against COVID-19. This investment will provide treatments and vaccines as well as healthcare resources to developing countries. countries. What's more, in order to continue to protect the health of the most vulnerable citizens, Minister Gold announced that Canada would also provide funding to help different countries with nutrition and food safety programs. The fight against COVID-19 is a worldwide effort. We need to work together to fight this virus and build a stronger and more healthy future for all.
Finally, I want to end this morning by recognizing that today marks the 5th anniversary of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's final report. The residential school system was one of the darkest chapters in our history. It has left a tragic legacy that continues to this day. To the survivors, family members, and all those who shared their truth, your courage and strength is remarkable. I also want to recognize the leadership of Senator Murray Sinclair, who's retiring from the Senate in January. His work as the Chief Commissioner changed Canada for the better. Senator Sinclair, like so many others who were part of the Commission, showed us the path forward, and it's up to all of us to walk the path of reconciliation. Together with survivors and communities, we have made important progress on the Commission's calls to action. 80% of the calls that are the sole or shared responsibility of the federal government are now completed or well underway. In the last few weeks alone, we invested $500 million to support Indigenous communities in exercising their jurisdiction over child and family services. We introduced legislation to implement the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. Our government will continue to work in partnership on everything from closing gaps in infrastructure to ending inequalities in the criminal justice system. We have moved forward, but we're not done yet. The national tragedy of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls must finally end. Over the last 5 years, we've worked with partners and communities to put a stop to violence against Indigenous women, girls, LGBTQ, and Two-Spirit people. Aujourd'hui, la ministre Bennett a souligné les investissements qui nous permettront de continuer à
Today,
aller de
Minister
l'avant,
Bennett highlighted investments that would allow us to go forward, especially establishing new shelters and having an overall strategy for violence prevention. Our government continues to be a partner in these efforts for reconciliation and to build a better future for all. Thank you, everyone. I will now give the floor to Dr. Tam.
Bonjour, good day to everyone. There have been 468,862 cases of COVID-19 in Canada, including 13,553 deaths. Nationally, there are over 75,842 active cases across the country. And yesterday, 6,731 cases were reported nationally. In addition, there were almost 1,400 new cases reported for Saturday and Sunday, and this brings the average daily case count to over 6,540 cases for the past week. The number of people experiencing severe illness continues to increase. So over the past 7 days, there were an average of 3,020 individuals with COVID-19 being treated in Canadian hospitals, including over 600 in critical care, and an average of over 110 deaths were reported each day. Following last week's authorization of the first COVID-19 vaccine for use in Canada, the National Advisory Committee on Immunization, Canada's independent expert advisory group on immunization, has released recommendations on the use of the Pfizer BioNTech COVID-19 vaccine. NACI's recommendations include important guidance on its safe and effective administration, and this includes the time interval between the first and second dose of the vaccine, and considerations for special populations, such as pregnant women and individuals who are immunocompromised or who have a severe allergic reaction to any of the components used in the vaccine. Canada's expert recommendations will support the provinces and territories and Indigenous leaders in the rollout of the COVID-19 immunization campaign across jurisdictions. As the COVID-19 landscape continues to evolve, NACI recommendations will be updated with additional evidence on authorized vaccines as it becomes available. Yesterday was a day of hope and excitement. Less than a week following the approval of the first vaccine, we began to hear and see the experiences of the first people vaccinated against COVID-19 in Canada, including personal support workers in Ontario and residents of long-term care in Quebec. Today, we have more good news with the prospect of the early availability of the Moderna vaccine once it receives regulatory approval. It is evident from the pace with which we have been able to move from approval to delivery and rollout of the first vaccination programs for priority populations that the ground has been well prepared for the next chapter in our response. As we move into this next chapter of Canada's COVID-19 response, I want to focus on a special ingredient that has and will continue to underpin our success. That is the partnership between public health and the public at large. When we all work together, each of us doing our part to reduce the likelihood of getting infected and spreading the virus, we are helping our health workforce. Our continued efforts are not only helping public health to quickly interrupt chains of transmission, we're also assisting the broader health workforce to plan for and roll out one of the most complex immunization campaigns in Canada's history. Canadians can continue to help by following public health advice and keeping up with good hygienic habits, physical distancing, hand washing, and mask wearing to prevent the spread of COVID-19 while we prepare the ground for widespread and lasting control through immunization. Thank you.
Bonjour à toutes et à tous. Il y a eu 468 862
There have
cas
been
de COVID-19 au Canada, dont
468,862 cases of
13
COVID-19 in
décès.
Canada,
À l'échelle
including
nationale, il y a plus de
13,553
75
deaths. Nationally,
842
there are
cas
over
actifs.
75,842 active cases
cas ont
across
été
the
signalés
country.
au pays.
Yesterday,
En outre, samedi et dimanche, il y a eu presque
6,731 cases were
1400 nouveaux
reported
cas.
nationally.
Cela porte
In
le
addition, there were
nombre moyen de
almost
cas par jour à
1,400
plus
new
de
cases reported for Saturday and Sunday.
6 540 au cours de la
This
semaine
brings the
dernière.
average daily
Le
case
nombre
count
de
to over
personnes gravement malades continue
6,540 cases for the
d'augmenter.
past week.
Au cours des 7
The number
derniers
of people
jours, en
experiencing
moyenne,
serious
3
illness
020 personnes
continues to
atteintes de la
increase.
COVID-19
Over the past
ont
7
été
days,
traitées dans
there
les
were on
hôpitaux
average
canadiens, dont
3,020
plus de 600
individuals
se
with
trouvaient aux soins
COVID-19 being treated in
intensifs
Canadian
et plus de
hospitals,
110
and over
décès ont été
600 in
signalés
critical
en
care, and an
moyenne chaque
average
jour.
of over 110
À la suite
deaths
de
were reported
l'autorisation
each day.
la semaine dernière
Following
du
last
premier
week's
vaccin contre
authorization
la
of the first
COVID-19 à
COVID-19
être
vaccine for
utilisé
use
au
in
Canada,
Canada,
le
the
Comité
National Advisory
consultatif
Committee
national de
on
l'immunisation,
Immunization,
groupe
NACI,
consultatif
Canada's
d'experts
independent
indépendants sur
expert advisory
l'immunisation au
group on
Canada, a
immunization,
publié des
has released
recommandations sur
recommendations on the
l'utilisation
use
du
of the
vaccin
Pfizer
de Pfizer-BioNTech
BioNTech
contre la
COVID-19
COVID-19.
vaccine.
Les recommandations du
NACI's
CCNI
recommendations
comprennent des conseils
include
importants sur
important
son
guidance on
administration
its safe and
sûre
effective
et efficace,
administration.
y compris
This
l'intervalle de temps
includes time
entre
interval
la
between the
première et la
first and
seconde dose
second
du
dose
vaccin,
of the
ainsi
vaccine
que les
and
considérations
considerations
relatives
for
à
special
des populations
populations,
particulières, comme les
such as pregnant
femmes
women
enceintes et les
and
personnes
individuals who are
immunodéprimées ou ayant eu une
immunocompromised
réaction
or who have had
allergique
a
grave
severe
à
allergic
l'une des
reaction to any of the
utilisés dans le
components
vaccin de
used in the Pfizer
Pfizer-BioNTech
BioNTech
contre la
COVID-19
COVID-19. Les
vaccine.
recommandations des experts du
NACI's
CCNI
expert
aideront les
recommendations
provinces et
will
territoires
support the
et les
provinces
dirigeants
and territories
autochtones à
and Indigenous
orchestrer la
leaders
campagne
in
de
the rollout
vaccination
of
contre
the
la COVID-19
COVID-19
dans toutes
immunization
les
campaign
compétences.
across
Comme
jurisdictions.
situation
As the
concernant la
COVID-19
COVID-19 continue
landscape continues to
d'évoluer, le
evolve,
CCNI
NACI
mettra à jour ses
recommendations will be
recommandations
updated
à
with
mesure
additional
que des
evidence
données
on
probantes
authorized
supplémentaires sur les
vaccines
vaccins
as it
autorisés
becomes
seront
available.
disponibles. Hier, c'était une journée
Yesterday
d'espoir
was a
et
day of hope
d'enthousiasme.
and
Moins
excitement.
d'une semaine
Less
après
than a week
l'approbation du
following the
vaccin
approval of the
de
Pfizer BioNTech
Pfizer-BioNTech,
vaccine,
nous avons
we
commencé
began to
à
hear
entendre
and
parler de
see the
l'expérience des
experiences
premières
of the
personnes
first people
vaccinées contre la
vaccinated
COVID-19
against
au Canada,
COVID-19 in Canada,
notamment les préposés
including
aux services de
personal
soutien
support workers
en Ontario et les résidents
in
des
Ontario and
établissements de
residents
soins
of
de longue
long-term
durée
care in
au Québec.
Quebec.
Aujourd'hui, nous avons
Today,
d'autres bonnes
we have
nouvelles.
more good
La
news
possibilité
with the
que le
prospect
vaccin
of
Moderna soit
early
disponible
availability
plus
of the
tôt que
Moderna
prévu,
vaccine
une fois qu'il
once it
aura
receives
reçu l'approbation
regulatory
des
approval.
autorités réglementaires. Il est évident,
It is
d'après le
evident
rythme
from the
auquel
pace
nous avons
with
pu
which
passer
we've
de
been able to
l'approbation
move
à la
from approval
livraison
to
et à
delivery and
l'exécution des
rollout
premiers
of the
programmes de
first
vaccination
vaccination
des
programs
populations
for
prioritaires,
priority
notre
populations,
planification
that the
a
ground
été
has
efficace
been
pour la
well
prochaine
prepared
étape
for
de
the next
notre
chapter in our
intervention à
response
la
to
COVID-19.
COVID-19.
Alors que nous abordons cette
As we
prochaine
move into
étape
this next
de
chapter
l'intervention
of
du
Canada's
Canada à la
COVID-19
COVID-19,
response,
nous voulons
I want
mettre
to focus
l'accent
on a
sur un
special
atout
ingredient
spécial
that
qui
has
est à la
and will
base de notre
continue
succès
to
et
underpin
qui
our
continuera de
success.
l'être. Il s'agit du
That
partenariat
is the
entre
partnership
la santé
between
publique
public
et le
health
grand public.
and the public at large.
Quand nous collaborons
When we
tous,
all work
chacun
together,
d'entre nous faisant
each
sa
of us
part pour
doing our
réduire la
part to reduce the
probabilité
likelihood
d'être
of getting
infecté, de
infected and
propager le
spreading the
virus,
virus,
nous aidons les
we are
professionnels de la
helping our
santé.
health workforce.
Non seulement nos efforts
Our
continuent
continued
aident la
efforts are
santé
not
publique
only
à
helping
briser
public
rapidement
health
les chaînes de
to quickly
transmission,
interrupt chains
nous
of
aidons
transmission,
également
we
l'ensemble
are
des
also
travailleurs de la
assisting the
santé
broader
à
health
planifier
workforce
et
to
à
plan for
orchestrer
and roll
l'une des
out
campagnes
one
de
of the most
vaccination les
complex
plus complexes
immunization
de l'histoire du
campaigns
Canada.
in Canada's
Les
history.
Canadiens peuvent continuer à
Canadians can
aider
continue
en
to
suivant
help
les conseils
by
de santé
following
publique
public health
et en
advice
gardant les
and
bonnes
keeping up
habitudes
with
d'hygiène,
good hygiene
à savoir la
habits,
distanciation physique,
physical
le
distancing,
lavage des mains et
hand
le port de
washing,
masque,
and mask
afin de
wearing
prévenir
to
la
prevent the
propagation de
spread
la
of
COVID-19,
COVID-19
pendant que nous nous
while we prepare
préparons
the
à
ground
contrôler
for
le virus de
widespread
façon
and lasting
généralisée
control
et durable par la
through
vaccination.
immunization.
Merci.
Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, Dr. No. Le premier ministre est disponible pour prendre des questions pendant 20 minutes aujourd'hui. La ministre Annan, les docteurs et le major général Fortin resteront disponibles pour une autre période de 20 minutes. The Prime Minister will be available to answer questions for 20 minutes today. Minister Annan, doctors, and Major General Fortin will remain available for another 20 minutes to answer more questions. Starting with the phone, en commençant par le téléphone. Opérateur, c'est à vous.
Thank you. Merci. First question, Ryan Tonti, National Post. Your line is open.
Yeah, good morning, Prime Minister. One of the companies that received military support for its long-term care homes when they were failing paid substantial dividends to its investors throughout the course of the year. Given that Canadian taxpayers paid for the military to be there, as well as to support those long-term care homes in a number of other ways, do you think it's right that that company was paying dividends to its shareholders in the millions of dollars while it needed the military support?
I think those are certainly questions to ask, Ryan, and I know over the coming months there will be many reflections by Canadians and others on that. Our focus from the very beginning was to just be there for Canadians who needed help, whether it was rolling out unprecedented direct supports like the CERB and the wage subsidy, whether it was shipping PPE to the provinces and giving them extra support for their healthcare systems, or whether it was directly through sending in the Canadian Armed Forces to support in long-term care homes. Our preoccupation was just being there for Canadians, and that's exactly what we did.
Following up, Ryan?
Yeah, on another issue, with the vaccines that you're announced today with Pfizer and Moderna, do we have a forecast for which one we expect will come next and which one we think will be key to really expanding the vaccine rollout to go beyond the targeted groups that we're seeing now?
Well, first of all, we know that we're expecting millions of doses in the first months of 2021 through Pfizer and Moderna. But at the same time, there are two other vaccine candidates going through the Health Canada rolling review regulatory process as we speak. And we are certainly optimistic that there will be more vaccines approved with more doses. As you know, Canada has secured a better and larger range of potential vaccine suppliers than just about any other country to secure more doses per capita for Canadians than for any other country in the world. So we are very, very well positioned, but every step of the way, Health Canada needs to do its full rigorous approvals process so that any vaccine approved in Canada will be guaranteed to be safe and effective.
Merci. Opérateur, next question.
Thank you. Merci. Prochaine question, Mélanie Marquis, La Presse. À vous.
Bonjour, Monsieur Trudeau.
Hello, Mr. Trudeau.
Ça fait 2 fois en l'espace de quoi,
This is
à peu près que vous annoncez une
twice
arrivée hâtive
that you've
de
announced
vaccins.
early
C'est
arrival
plus
of
que ça à quoi on
vaccine.
s'attendait.
This
Quand on
is more
reçoit
than
des
what was
ententes comme ça, est-ce que
expected.
ça coûte plus cher pour que les vaccins arrivent
Is
plus
it
tôt?
more costly to receive early doses
Dès
of
le début,
vaccines?
cet été,
Since the
on a
beginning,
travaillé avec
and
les différentes
since the
compagnies.
summer, in
Comme
fact, we've been working with different
le
companies.
directeur de Moderna a dit
As
quelques
the head
semaines,
of
le
Moderna
fait que
said a few weeks
Canada
ago, the fact that
était
Canada
un des premiers
was one
pays
of the first
à
countries
signer, à
to
s'engager
sign
avec
an
Moderna,
agreement
ça nous
with
donne des
Moderna
avantages
gives us
par rapport
some
à
advantages with regards
leur
to
capacité de livrer
their
des vaccins
capacity
plus
to
tôt comme
deliver
cela. Mais sur ça, je suis
doses
très
of
content de
vaccine.
passer la parole à la ministre
I'm very pleased to
Anand,
give
qui a
the
été
floor to
responsable
Minister
pour ces
Anand.
contrats.
She was responsible for these contracts.
Merci beaucoup pour la question.
Thank you for
C'est
the
une question
question.
très importante.
This is a very
Comme le
important
Premier
question.
ministre a
As the
dit,
Prime Minister
c'est
just said,
part de nos ententes avec
this
les
is part of our
fournisseurs de
agreement
vaccins de
with
négocier
vaccine
des
companies.
termes
That is to say, to
au sujet de le
negotiate
coût,
terms with
par
regards
exemple,
to the
de
cost
les vaccins.
of vaccines.
Nous devons payer the fair market value
We have to pay the fair
of
market
these
value
vaccines.
of these vaccines.
C'est une chose très importante,
This is very
mais
important.
notre priorité
Our
est
priority
d'avoir des
is to
vaccins
receive
ici au
vaccines
Canada pour
here in
toute la
Canada
population
for all of
canadienne.
the Canadian
Et ça,
citizens.
c'est la priorité
This
de moi
is
et
my number one
de notre
priority. It's
gouvernement.
the priority of our government.
Nous allons avoir les
And we
vaccins
will have
ici,
vaccines here
dans ce pays,
in this
ce
country.
mois. 7 mois, ça,
We will
c'est
have
la
some
chose le
vaccines
plus
in
important, je
December,
pense.
and that's the most important thing to know.
En suivi, Mélanie?
Oui, mais en fait, en suivi, je vais reposer la même question.
Yes, I'm going to ask the same question because the answer wasn't really what I'm looking for. Is it more expensive to receive early doses? And secondly, are you expecting Health Canada to approve the Moderna vaccine this week?
Well, thank you so much. I have answered this question, I believe, last week, and I'll just refresh that response because it remains accurate, that there is a continued negotiation about the deliveries of these vaccines and the terms of the deliveries. And as we push for earlier deliveries for Canadians and for the health and safety of Canadians during this crucial time, we are paying fair market value of these vaccines. And in addition, could you just remind me what your second question was?
Oui, when would Moderna
oui, ça
vaccine
c'est important. Oui, mais je voudrais dire que
yes, that's important. But I would like to say
j'ai pas de rôle, pas du tout,
I
dans
have no role to
l'approbation
play in the
de ces
approval
vaccins.
process
Et
for the
ça, c'est
vaccines,
correct.
and
Nous
that is the
devons
right way to do
laisser
this.
le
We
Santé
have to
Canada
allow
de
Health
faire
Canada
le travail très
to
très
do
important
their very
avec
important work
l'expertise de
using the expertise
l'organisation
of
là.
this organization.
Et après ça, nous
And
sommes prêts
afterwards,
de recevoir
we will
les
be ready
livraisons de vaccins.
to receive delivery of vaccines.
Effectivement, l'approbation de
Yes, the
vaccins, ça ne
approval
relève pas
of
du
vaccines
politique, évidemment.
is not a political
C'est
issue.
les experts à Santé Canada qui font leur
Experts
travail,
at
comme ils
Health
le font
Canada
pour
do their job,
tout
and
médicament
this is
ou
what
tout
they do
vaccin
for all
au
medication
Canada
or all
en temps normaux.
vaccines in Canada,
Ils
even in
suivent
normal times.
toutes les
They
étapes
have an approval
nécessaires.
process with
On a
many
entendu
necessary
que ça
steps. We've heard
continue
that
bien
things
pour
are well
Moderna
underway
et il pourrait
for the Moderna
avoir
vaccine.
une réponse
And
dans
we might
la semaine
receive
à venir.
an answer
Donc,
next week.
on est positionné, si cette
So
approbation
if
vient,
this
pour
approval
recevoir
is provided,
des
we
centaines
are
de
well
milliers de
positioned to
doses
receive hundreds of
de
thousands of
Moderna,
doses of the
même avant
Moderna
la fin
vaccine,
décembre.
even before
Mais
the end of
évidemment,
December.
le travail que
But
doit faire
obviously,
Santé
the work
Canada
that needs to be done
doit
by Health
être
Canada
fait sans
has to be
compromis
done without,
et ils vont continuer de
any type
faire
of
le
compromise,
nécessaire
and
pour
they will
approuver ces
do
vaccins
everything
avec
to
certitude
approve
le plus rapidement possible.
these vaccines
Merci. Opérateur,
as soon
dernière
as
question au
possible.
téléphone.
Thank you. Merci. Next question, Brett Forster, APTN News. Line open.
Hello, Prime Minister. The PRC commissioners have offered a very different take on your government's reconciliation progress than the one you just offered in your remarks. They say the progress has been slow, uneven, and that your government still doesn't have a tangible plan to implement their calls to action. How do you respond to their criticism?
First of all, I welcome and thank the commissioners, not just for their extraordinary work over the past decade that set Canada on a better course for the future, but their continued engagement in making sure that reconciliation is something taken on not just by the federal government, but by provinces and territories, and indeed by non-Indigenous Canadians as well, because we all need to be partners in this process. Over the past 5 years, we have completed or are well underway on 80% of the TRC calls to action that directly touch the federal government. But there's a lot more to do, and we are going to continue working on that. We know that what took generations and indeed centuries to break and to destroy will take more than 5 years to fix. But the work that we have done as a government has been more than any other government in the past, and we're just getting started. We know how much more there is to do, and we will continue to work with strong voices in leadership like the TRC commissions and Indigenous communities right across the country to move forward on reconciliation.
Following up, Mr. Foster.
Yes, thank you. So again, the commissioners, of course, said they welcome these recent announcements and what progress has been made, but they're also sounding alarm about the pace of action. They want to see you renew that sense of urgency. So what do you say to that?
I share their impatience. I share the sense of urgency. Certainly this pandemic has demonstrated yet again just how vulnerable certain Indigenous communities are and how much we need to continue to work even faster on the path of reconciliation. But at the same time, we need to remember that as much as Ottawa might want to put forward the answers and move forward very quickly, it can't be that way. We need to do this in partnership, hand in hand with Indigenous communities who need to determine their future and their path. And we have to be there to support, to resource, and to accompany them. And that always takes a little bit longer. But I share your impatience, Brett. I share the impatience of the commissioners. I share the impatience of all Canadians to continue doing the hard work of reconciliation and move forward as quickly as possible to the better country we know is ahead of us down this shared road.
Thank you. Moving to the room now. Rachel.
Hi, Prime Minister. Rachel Haynes from CTV National News. Should corporations and private medical labs in Canada be able to purchase vaccines to give to their own employees and clients? Is that consistent with the principles of the Canada Health Act?
Our priority is ensuring that all Canadians have access to a free, safe, and effective vaccine as soon as possible. The deals, the contracts we have signed with 7 different potential vaccine producers, the contracts we have signed for potentially up to 10 doses per Canadian over the coming months will ensure that all Canadians get access to a free and safe vaccine. Private companies can make their decisions as they wish. None of that will have any impact on the fact that all Canadians who want one will get a free vaccine in the coming months of 2021.
Steve Chase, Globe and Mail. Good afternoon. I'm here to ask you about Dominic Barton and the opioid crisis that's devastating communities across North America. He is, of course, your ambassador to China, but was previously your government's top economic advisor. And of course, he was the man in charge at McKinsey & Company, the global consulting firm, for almost a decade. So what Canadians might not know is the role that McKinsey played in helping to boost sales of OxyContin for Purdue Pharma. This is the company, of course, which is now whose role is being examined in the courts. So even as Mr. Barton was offering you economic advice on how to boost growth here, the opioid crisis was unfolding and causing financial ruin and personal ruin across North America. Now, in recent days, court documents revealed that McKinsey was actually proposing, and this is under Mr. Barton's leadership, rebates paying rebates to pharmacists so they wouldn't stop dispensing OxyContin if there had been overdoses in their area. Now, what we're trying to figure out is what Mr. Barton knew about this. At a House of Commons committee he appeared before last week, asked him, was he aware of this work which a former McKinsey consultant called the Banality of Evil MBA edition? He didn't answer. He said he told the House of Commons committee to look at the McKinsey website where there's an apology for this. The apology makes no mention of Mr. Barton's role in this. We then called McKinsey and we asked them, what role did Mr. Barton play in this? Was he aware of this? They said to call Mr. Barton. We called Mr. Barton. He didn't reply to us. We talked to your office. Your office didn't reply to us. So we're here to ask you, have you asked Mr. Barton whether he was aware of what was happening at McKinsey under his tenure?
Dominic Barton is an extraordinary Canadian who is doing great work for us in China as Canada's ambassador. He has a long history in business and in economics and is the right person to continue moving forward at a very difficult time in Canada-China relations. His leadership on bringing home, on working hard to bring home the two Michaels, his defense of Canadian interests, including Canadian commercial interests, and his continued engagement on creating opportunities and growth for Canadians makes him an outstanding representative, and I'm pleased to have him by my side on the international stage as we work very hard to both stand up for Canadian values and to move forward on building a better future. In regards to the opioids epidemic, this government has been extraordinarily active from day one, whether it's been partnering with provinces and territories on responses, working directly with frontline workers, or moving forward on approval of safe consumption sites, which there was one when we took office. Now there are dozens and dozens all across the country. We know there is much more to do to counter this extraordinary tragedy that is hitting so many families across the country. Even as we deal with this COVID pandemic, the opioids epidemic continues as well. We will keep doing everything we can to support Canadians and keep them safe in the coming years.
Thank you. Next question in the room.
Hélène Buzetti du Devoir. Bonjour, M. Trudeau. J'aimerais revenir à cette
Hello, Mr.
histoire
Trudeau.
de
I'd like to come
Radio-Canada
back
que
to
vous songez à
this,
utiliser la loi sur les langues officielles pour imposer l'usage du
this
français
idea
dans les
that you
entreprises à charte
will
fédérale au Québec.
ensure that the
Qu'est-ce que
French
cet
language
outil-là,
is
la loi
used.
sur les
You're
langues
talking about the
officielles, vous
Official
permettrait
Languages
de
Act.
faire
What would the
que la loi 101
Official Languages Act
demande,
allow you to
que tout le monde
do
demande au Québec
that Bill 101 doesn't allow
d'élargir
you
aux
to do?
entreprises, vous permettrait pas de faire? C'est quoi la différence?
What is the difference between the two? Well, we know that Canada is a bilingual country, but for Canada to remain a bilingual country, Quebec
d'abord et avant tout
has to
francophone.
be a
C'est pour ça que
francophone
même pendant que nous
province,
sommes
and
là
that is
pour
why,
défendre les
even
langues
though we are
officielles
there
en
to
situation
defend official
minoritaire à
languages
travers le pays,
and
nous allons
minority official
aussi, comme
languages
on a dit
throughout
dans
the
le discours
country,
du trône,
we
être
will,
là pour
as we said in the
défendre la
speech
langue
from the throne,
française
be there to
au
defend
Québec.
the French language in Quebec.
C'est pour ça que
That is
nous
why
regardons cette modernisation
we are
de
looking at the
la loi sur les langues
modernization of the
officielles
Official
qui est
Languages Act.
certainement due et qui va
This
avoir des
review
mesures pour protéger le
is
français
due, and there will
partout,
be
y
measures
compris
to
au
protect
Québec.
French
Nous
everywhere,
sommes
including
encore
in
en train de
Quebec.
travailler là-dessus,
We're
mais je
still
peux
working on
souligner
it, but
que
I would like to
je suis tout
highlight
à fait d'accord
that I
avec
completely agree
les anciens premiers ministres du
with the
Québec
former
et
premiers of
les
Quebec
Québécois
and
qui, comme moi, sont
Quebecers
préoccupés par le déclin
who are
du français.
concerned by the
Et
decline of the
donc,
French
nous allons
language, and I
travailler
am as
pour
well.
protéger
We
le
will
français au
work in order to
Québec.
protect
Mais en
French
plus
in
de
Quebec.
tout ce qu'il
What's
faut
more,
faire pour protéger
we
le
will do
français au
everything we
Québec,
need to
c'est le
protect
gouvernement
French
fédéral
in
qui a
Quebec.
aussi une
The federal
responsabilité
government
pour
does have a
protéger la langue
responsibility
française
to protect the French
partout au
language
Canada.
throughout
C'est
the
pas juste
country.
à la
It's
protéger au
not just to
Québec, c'est la
protect the French
protéger
language
à
in Quebec,
Saint-Boniface,
but in
à Timmins,
Saint-Boniface, in
à
Timmins, in
Caraquet,
Caraquet, in
On
Moncton.
a pu défendre
We were
et
able to
sauver
defend
l'Université francophone de l'Ontario
save the project for the
quand
French
il y avait
language
des
university
politiciens
in
conservateurs qui
Ontario
voulaient couper.
when a
On est
conservative
là pour nommer
politicians wanted to
que
cut
des
this.
juges bilingues à la Cour
We have
suprême du
appointed
Canada. Et
bilingual
comme j'ai
judges
dit,
to the
on
Supreme
va
Court of
continuer
Canada,
notre
and
travail
we will continue
pour
to work in
moderniser
order to
la loi sur les
modernize
langues officielles
the
pour
Official Languages
bien
Act of
protéger
Canada
cette
in order
belle
to
langue française que
protect
nous
this
aimons
beautiful
tous.
French language.
Merci. Prochaine question dans la salle.
Oui, bonjour, Laurence Martin,
Laurence
Radio-Canada.
Martin, Radio-Canada.
On voit beaucoup, M.
We
Trudeau,
see,
de
Mr.
Canadiens
Trudeau,
qui sont
we
très
see a lot of
préoccupés par le
Canadians
vaccin,
hugely
qui ne veulent
concerned
pas
about the
en fait,
vaccine.
l'avoir.
They don't want to have the
Qu'est-ce que vous allez
vaccine.
faire concrètement, là,
What are you
concrètement dans
concretely
les
going to
prochaines
do
semaines, dans les
in the
prochains
weeks
mois
and months
pour
to
que
come
tous les Canadiens soient vaccinés?
to overcome this vaccine
Il y a tout
hesitancy.
un travail pour
There's a lot of work
démontrer
that needs to be done in order
que
to
le
demonstrate
plan que nous
that
avons en place,
our
qui
plan
commence avec
that
l'approbation de
begins with
Santé
the
Canada,
approval
qui
coming from
passe
Health
par les
Canada
professionnels
and
de la
then
santé en train de
healthcare
livrer
professionals
les vaccins à travers le pays,
who deliver
chapeautés
as a
si bien
vaccine.
par
And
le
this is
lieutenant
headed so
général, le
well
major
by
général Danny
Major
Fortin.
General Fortin.
On est très, très chanceux
We are
d'avoir
extremely fortunate
des éléments qui vont rassurer les
to
Canadiens.
have
On
many
voit
things in
aussi
place that will reassure
qu'avec ces
Canadians.
premières
We can
doses,
see that with these
on
first doses,
démontre la sécurité de façon
we see
concrète
the
pour le
safety
vaccin
of this
aux
vaccine.
Canadiens. Et de
This is
plus en
clearly
plus,
demonstrated to
oui, les
Canadians.
politiciens vont
And yes,
encourager les
politicians
gens
will
de
encourage
se
people
faire vacciner.
to
Moi,
get the
certainement,
vaccine. And
personnellement,
personally
dès
speaking,
que
as
j'aurai
soon
la chance,
as
dès
I will
que
have the
ce sera
opportunity,
mon tour,
and it will be my turn,
je vais me faire vacciner
I
avec
will get
enthousiasme.
vaccinated
Mais je
with great
sais qu'encore
enthusiasm.
plus,
But I do
c'est les
know
médecins,
that it's
c'est les
the
scientifiques,
doctors,
c'est
scientists,
les gens de la santé publique
people who work in
qui
public health
vont être écoutés comme ils
will
ont
be listened to.
été écoutés par
They
les
have
Canadiens
been
à
listened
travers
to
le pays
by
pendant cette
Canadians
pandémie,
throughout the country
qui
during
vont
the entire
rassurer les
pandemic.
Canadiens
They will
que
reassure
tout
Canadians
vaccin
that
disponible au
all
Canada
vaccines available
sera
in Canada
sécuritaire
will be
et
safe
efficace.
and effective.
Depuis les débuts, les
Since
Canadiens
the
ont
very beginning,
écouté les
Canadians
conseils de la santé
have listened
publique, les
to
conseils des
advice coming
médecins,
from
des
public
experts,
health,
et
doctors,
ont pu
experts,
gérer cette
specialists,
crise
and
avec évidemment trop de tragédies, mais
we
mieux
have had a
quand
lot of
même que
tragedy during this
beaucoup d'autres
crisis, but
pays.
we've managed
Nous allons continuer de faire
relatively
confiance
well
aux
compared to
scientifiques et
other
aux
countries.
experts qui nous
We will
gardent en
continue
sécurité à
to
tous les jours
trust
et j'ai
our
bien
scientists
confiance
and our public
que
health
les Canadiens
experts.
vont être
I am fully
rassurés
confident
de voir
that
à
Canadians
quel
will be
point
very reassured
on a
to
des
see
processus
the extent to which
rigoureux
we have
et des experts
rigorous processes in
extraordinaires
place
qui
and excellent
nous démontrent à
public
quel
health
point
experts, and this will
c'est la bonne
demonstrate
chose à faire
that it
que
is
de
the correct
prendre
thing
ce
to do,
vaccin
that is
sécuritaire et efficace pour
to
qu'on puisse en
be
finir
immunized with this
avec
safe and effective
cette pandémie.
vaccine to finally end this pandemic.
Prochaine question dans la salle.
Prime Minister Michael Couture with Global National. I wanted to ask you, last week Dr. Bonnie Henry said that there's information that they, quote, received internationally and from Canadian agencies that there's been a concerted effort to try and interrupt the cold chain, for example, and sabotage immunization programs. How concerned are you about that, especially given the fact that we're now ramping up the number of vaccination sites, and how are we going to secure this and prevent any kind of sabotage?
Part of reassuring Canadians about the safety and efficiency of the vaccine is not just the extraordinarily rigorous Health Canada approval process, which was done quicker than usual, but without cutting any corners or taking shortcuts. The amount of resources we put forward, the amount of unprecedented cooperation and collaboration across allies and with the medical community has allowed for a full approval of these vaccines. Furthermore, the logistical delivery of those vaccines has been extraordinarily important to establish, to secure, and to ensure no interference or problems along that chain. And that's why we are so fortunate to have Major General Danny Fortin leading the logistical rollout of these vaccines and ensuring the integrity and the safety of that supply chain. And I'm happy to turn to him right now. Danny, if you could speak to the safety and integrity of the supply chain.
Thank you, Prime Minister. As I indicated before, there are a number of threat indicators that we're closely monitoring between the agencies, intelligence service, the law enforcement agencies. The appropriate level of information is shared down the line to provinces and territories, to the law enforcement agencies so that they take concrete actions. The logistics service providers, UPS, FedEx and MR joint venture, they take the appropriate measures as they are responsible to deliver along the cold chain. They monitor threats along the transfer points, and they take the appropriate measures as well. What I could say to all Canadians is that the appropriate measures are being taken by the appropriate organizations. And while I understand that there are questions about possible risks at a location or another, rest assured that it's being closely monitored by all parties.
Thank you. We have time for two quick questions.
Hi, Prime Minister. Tom Perry, CBC. On the Moderna vaccine, you were talking about doses going to the north and to Indigenous communities. Is that entire first shipment going to be going north, going to these communities, or other groups or regions going to be getting it? And on the Pfizer vaccine, the 200,000 doses coming in, is that still going to be going on a per capita basis, or do you see a time when you're going to have to start prioritizing areas with a higher case count?
Excellent questions, Tom. First of all, we've been working very, very closely, not just with Moderna, but with premiers of the territories and with leaders in remote and Indigenous communities to look at their schedule of delivery, their availability of resources to ensure that the most vulnerable are prioritized first. We will have more to announce in the coming days as Moderna firms up its own logistical and rollout plans, but you can rest assured that the conversations that I've had directly with the provinces and specifically on Moderna with the territories have gone very, very well, and people can rest assured that our capacity to get the vaccines to people who need it most and earliest will continue, and like I said, we'll have more to say on that in the coming days. In regards to Pfizer, the rollout schedule is continuing to be worked on. We have to understand that these are companies that are ramping up production in a massive way, rapidly, of a product that needs to be safe and secure every step of the way. There is uncertainties in their production. Our responsibility is to provide certainty on logistics and on delivery, and that's exactly what we are focused on. But I'm sure Minister Anand could add a little bit on both Moderna and Pfizer.
Thank you so much, Prime Minister. Just to build on the logistics question that you asked, Tom, we are responsible for transit into Canada of the Moderna vaccine. So unlike Pfizer, that is bringing that vaccine to us and actually delivering the vaccines to the sites themselves, Canada will be picking up the Moderna vaccine, and that is work that is going on now to ensure that the logistics are in place to go and pick up the Moderna vaccine. And in terms of the shipment of the Pfizer vaccine, which was the second part of your question, we will have 70 sites ready to administer those doses, which is up from 14 sites this week. So you can see that, as the Prime Minister rightly mentioned, we are all ramping up. The companies are ramping up their production, and at the same time, here in Canada, we are ensuring that logistic systems are in place for the distribution of these vaccines right across the country.
Lee Berthium, Canadian Press, sir. I wanted to ask about the RCMP watchdog report this morning. It says that it was acceptable for the Mounties to monitor demonstrations, record video of protesters, scour social media and other open sources for information about activists protesting the now defunct Northern Gateway Pipeline project, and collect license plate numbers for intelligence gathering purposes. I was wondering if you agree with this assessment from the watchdog.
Obviously, this is an important report, and we're going to take a careful look at it and its recommendations as well as conclusions. We know there is much to do to improve the RCMP in terms of systemic discrimination, systemic racism, and how it deals with certain groups. That is work that is being done not just with the RCMP, but in police forces and intelligence and security agencies right across the country. We will, of course, take careful note of recommendations coming from broad sources on how to move forward with the right solutions for Canada and for Canadians.
Thank you, Prime Minister. This is all the time you have with us today.
Thank you. Merci. Prochaine question, Émilie Bergeron, à vous.
Oui, bonjour. Une question
Hello.
sur la
I have a
distribution
question
des
on
doses du vaccin de Moderna.
the
Est-ce que
distribution
ce
of the
sera comme
Moderna
pour le vaccin de
vaccines. Will this be
Pfizer,
similar to the
au
Pfizer
prorata,
vaccine? Will it be on a
ou on
prorated
veut
basis?
ajouter d'autres
Or
critères,
are
notamment
you going to
pour
change the
les
criteria?
obligations envers les Premières Nations, les peuples
For
autochtones?
instance, more increased availability for
Oui, alors
Indigenous
c'est le Major
populations?
Général Fortin.
This is Major
La
General Fortin.
distribution
The
du vaccin
distribution of the
Moderna
Moderna
et
vaccine
la planification
and
détaillée est en
the
cours. On
detailed
est en train de
planning
faire
is
un
underway.
exercice d'ailleurs qui a
We
commencé
are
aujourd'hui.
undertaking an exercise that
Exercice
began
à sec
today,
ou un dry run.
and it's a dry run.
Alors que des boîtes sont
Boxes are
envoyées
sent
de la manufacture
from
et amenées au Canada jusqu'à des points de
processing plant
distribution
and then
identifiés
are
par
sent to
notre fournisseur de
identified
services
points
logistiques
by our logistical services provider,
d'entreprise FedEx Innomar.
FedEx
Maintenant, la
Innomar.
distribution détaillée se
as
fait
for in-depth
per capita et on va
planning,
privilégier
it will
les
be
régions
on a per
éloignées
capita basis, and
et les territoires.
we
Alors,
will
au sein
target
du
isolated
groupe de points de
communities and northern
distribution, lorsque le vaccin sera
territories.
autorisé pour
So,
utilisation
as a
au Canada,
distribution point,
ces
when the
points de
vaccine will be
distribution
approved in
incluent
Canada, these
territoires et les régions
distribution
éloignées
points
dans les
includes
provinces, ainsi que des régions
isolated
plus urbaines.
regions and urban areas and the north.
Okay. Et au
Okay.
sujet de
So with
Hang on, we're
regards-
just going to get
Pfizer
the
et
response in English. Thanks.
Same in English?
Yeah, of course.
Okay. So the distribution for Moderna vaccine is, the planning of it is well underway. This week, we're executing a dry run exercise as similar to what we did last week with Pfizer product. We have orders in. So boxes will be shipped, boxes that do not contain vaccines will be shipped this week from the manufacturer. This process is very much underway. 2 points of distribution in provinces and territories, and then that allows us to really tweak, adjust as we about to embark in the distribution. When the vaccine becomes available and authorized for distribution in Canada, this will be distributed on a per capita basis to provinces and territories, very much putting the territories and the remote and isolated areas as part of this plan and as part of the initial distribution.
Srivi?
It's Dr. New. Maybe I could
sorry.
Elaborate from a public health perspective. As we've said previously, our planning assumption has been sort of the overall 6 million doses for the first quarter, and that's a combination of the Pfizer vaccine and Moderna. And what we've also indicated is that at this point, understanding is that it's 4 million doses of Pfizer and 2 million doses of Moderna. So that's a 2-to-1 ratio. So using that as the envelope, we all agreed at the public health tables that it would be a per capita allocation. But as we also said previously, there are challenges in the north. The territories have indicated to us that no, it doesn't make sense for them to receive their sort of proportion or their portion of the doses in Pfizer product because it's too challenging to use logistically. So they would prefer to use all Moderna product once that's approved. So when you think about it, with good collaboration by the other provinces, their ratio would be more than 2-to-1 if you look at the, sort of the overall envelope, and that's what's going on now, as Major General Fortin has indicated. It's a bit of sort of adjustment for the fact that the territories will get all of their doses in Moderna product, none with Pfizer, and also that their shipment will be hopefully moved up as soon as possible. It doesn't make sense to give them in small shipments. They're saying, well, you know, your one priority group will give you this week, and then the next week it might be something else. It's better to give it all at once. They can go into the communities and vaccinate, obviously, the populations that you need to vaccinate. So I think hopefully that provides more clarity, because I know it's been confusing looking at sort of the two products, the overall envelope, and so on. Thank you. Avec notre...
Ma question...
Oh, hang on, we're just going to go in French. Hang on.
Selon les principes pour notre
According
planification avec
our
le comité
planning,
consultatif spécial avec nos homologues des provinces et territoires, on
Our
planifie
counterparts
pour
in
un total de
provinces and
6 millions de
territories,
doses
we
de
are
vaccins pour
planning
le
for 6
premier
million
trimestre.
doses
En
of
effet,
vaccine
c'est
for
4
the first
millions de
quarter.
doses de
So it's 4
vaccin
million
Pfizer et 2
doses
millions
of
de doses
Pfizer and
de
2
vaccin
million
Moderna.
from
On
Moderna.
attend toujours ça va être un vaccin homologué.
And
Puis après, c'est toujours le principe,
there's
on
always
va
this principle that is
distribuer
used
l'attribution
that we
de
will
vaccins
attribute
de
vaccines,
6 millions de
the
doses
6
par
million
habitant
doses will
basé
be
sur
on a
la
per
population
capita
des provinces et
allocation.
territoires. Mais on sait aussi que
We
les
also
territoires,
know
c'est trop
that for
difficile
the northern
d'accepter
territories, it
utiliser
is too
le
difficult for
vaccin
them
Pfizer parce
to
que
use Pfizer,
selon les
the Pfizer
exigences
vaccine,
logistiques.
because of
Donc,
the
pour les
logistical
territoires, tout le monde
difficulties
est
linked to
d'accord
this.
qu'on va
Everyone agrees
donner
that for the northern
seulement 100%
territories,
le vaccin Moderna
they
au
will receive
territoire.
only the
Si
Moderna vaccine.
on continue avec ça,
So if we
c'est une bonne collaboration avec toutes les autres
continue
provinces
this,
pour dire,
it
OK,
is a
c'est
good
ça.
cooperation with the other provinces to
Au
say,
lieu de voir
okay,
le ratio de
instead
2
of
à 1
having a
de
2-to-1
Pfizer
ratio,
Moderna, si
Pfizer
on
to
donne
Moderna,
100%
if we give
de
100%
vaccins Moderna
of
au
Moderna
territoire,
vaccine to the
c'est sûr les autres
territories,
provinces
the other
doivent accepter
provinces have
une
to
proportion
accept
plus
a higher
de le vaccin
proportion
Pfizer
of the
comparé à
Pfizer
Moderna.
vaccine.
Ça, c'est les
And so
aspects, les
these are the
considérations vraiment comme les
different
technico-logistiques qu'on continue
logistical considerations that
à
are
discuter avec nos
underway and
homologues
being
des provinces et
discussed with our
territoires. Mais
provincial
ça,
and
c'est le principe.
territorial counterparts.
Go
But
ahead
that's
with
the
follow-up.
principle.
Yes, thank you. Oui, donc mon suivi,
Here's my
le
follow-up
Premier ministre
question.
Trudeau a
Prime Minister
mentionné
Trudeau
qu'il y aurait
said
70
that there would be
sites pour la vaccination
70
de
sites for
Pfizer.
Pfizer,
Donc,
for the
ça,
use of the
c'est à
Pfizer
partir
vaccine.
de
And so
la semaine prochaine,
is
si
this
je
as of
comprends bien,
next
il va y
week?
avoir au total 70
There will
sites.
be a total of
Donc,
70
si, le
vaccination
Major
sites.
Général Fortin, si vous pouvez
So,
m'en dire un peu plus
Major General Fortin, could you
sur
please
la division de ces 70
speak
sites
to the
pour chaque
distribution
province?
for each province?
Oui, alors,
Yes.
effectivement, 70 sites la
We
semaine
will have
prochaine.
70
Certaines
vaccination
provinces
sites next
se
week.
limitent à
Some
augmenter de 1
provinces
ou
will
2 sites
increase
d'une
by
façon
1
plus
or 2
progressive.
on a more
D'autres ont
progressive
davantage de capacité de
fashion.
population et
Others have a greater capacity and more
ont décidé
population
d'activer
and have
davantage de
decided
sites, des
to
points d'usage.
activate
Ces
more
points
sites.
d'usage-là sont, l'entraînement
These
est en
points of
cours.
use
On est en train de
are
confirmer
underway.
tous les
We are now
niveaux de leur état de
confirming
préparation, c'est-à-dire les provinces nous
the
indiquent qu'ils
preparation.
sont prêts selon les
Provinces
critères qu'on
indicate
avait
if they're
établis ensemble.
ready
Alors,
according
tout
to
est
criteria
en
that we
bonne
set together.
direction pour être
We're
prêt
headed in the right
à
direction
augmenter
in order
la
to
cadence la
ramp
semaine
up
prochaine d'une façon très délibérée pour assurer
the number of
une
vaccination sites
distribution
next
rapide et
week
efficace à
for
tous les
rapid
Canadiens.
and efficient
Il y aura
vaccine
davantage de
distribution
sites
for all
dans le
Canadians.
futur, à
In the
mesure que
future,
les
there will be
quantités
more
vont se
sites
présenter
as
et
we will
qu'on
have
pourra
increased quantity
avoir
of vaccine available.
une augmentation considérable dans tous
This will
les endroits. Et
be
j'ajouterais
when we
aussi
have
qu'il y a des
considerable
sites
increase
qui
in all
qui
places, and the
deviendront
sites
peut-être redondants et seront
might become
fermés. Alors, c'est
redundant and will
totalement
have
dans
to
les mains des
close. So
provinces
it's in the
et des
hands of the
territoires pour les points
provinces
de
and
distribution
territories with regards to
de changer leur
the
pattern,
distribution
si vous voulez, de
sites. They might
distribution.
have to change their distribution pattern.
OK, nous allons prendre une autre question par téléphone et on va retourner à la salle pour 2 questions. Prochaine question.
Thank you. Merci. Next question, Justin Ling, freelance. Line open.
Hey, good afternoon. So in the last couple of days, we've been asking about the computer system that's designed to track the COVID-19 vaccine rollout, including monitoring of the cold storage. And we've gotten a kind of a lack of clarity about why it's taken this long to actually ask industry for submissions on this. And there's not a whole lot of clarity about when we actually expect to get the system online. The request for proposal says January. Major General Fortin, yesterday you said in the coming months. So I'm wondering if you can tell us why it took till November 30th for you to ask industry for proposals, and when you actually expect this new system, which you call mission critical, to be online.
Hi, Justin. I'll start and then I'll hand it over to the officials from PHAC and Major General Denis Fortin. So we are ensuring that we have full functionality in place from an IT perspective for the surveillance and monitoring of the mass vaccination program that is now ramping up in Canada. I want to be clear that the system that the Public Health Agency of Canada has in place is functional already and has been utilized for vaccination programs such as the flu vaccine. So the idea underlying the process that PSPC is undertaking is to provide further functionality to an existing operational system to enhance what is currently in place at the time that we are having this conversation, in fact. And that's a point that has to be recognized, that this country has been engaging in mass vaccinations of the flu vaccine for decades. And so we're ensuring that the existing systems are enhanced with this process that we have issued via RFP directly to pre-selected suppliers. I will also say that we are doing it on a very expeditious time frame from the time at which we received an indication from the Public Health Agency of Canada to undertake this process. And on that note, I will hand it over to the officials at the Public Health Agency of Canada or Major General Denis Fortin.
This is Teresa. So maybe I'll start. And I think it's exactly as Minister Anand has said, the provinces have existing programs and systems that monitors their individual immunization programs, and that this goes on every single year, and particularly for the influenza vaccine campaign, which they vaccinated more people this year than any other year as well. But I think this is a great opportunity to enhance systems and connect the provinces across the country as well. And I think, not that you couldn't do it with existing systems, it may make things more efficient and be able to enhance the operationality of the rollout process. I don't know if Major General Fortin has anything to add, but it's just to enhance functionality.
Thank you, Dr. Tam. Thank you, Minister. I think I would say that there hasn't been a job that I've done in the last couple of decades where there wasn't an issue with IT and with upgrading softwares and the challenges that creates. And in the absence of the best option available, we currently have systems where we're closely coordinating with provinces and territories. We get the information that we require. Could it be streamlined and be more efficient? I think the answer to that is yes, and that is what the agency and with PSPC Canada, Government of Canada is trying to will acquire.
And I guess I will just wrap up this response by saying that we have to remember that we weren't expecting to get December doses, that we've been aggressively negotiating with suppliers for early doses of these vaccines over the last number of weeks and months. And it is as a result of those negotiations and the aggressive posture that we have brought to the table with fortitude that we have been able to secure these early doses for Canadians. And at the same time, we are putting in place the logistics system so well in hand with Major General Fortin.
Follow up?
Yeah, frankly, it shouldn't have come as a surprise to the government that we would have to figure out a more expansive system for managing the rollout. I'm wondering if you can tell me how this new system is supposed to interact with Panorama, which was supposed to be the sort of pan-Canadian solution for vaccine tracking, or is it going to run parallel? Is there a consideration of building on top of Panorama, or is this system going to be entirely separate from it?
Well, it's Teresa's time. I can start. The provinces each have their own registries. There's only one jurisdiction that doesn't have it. So that's just, Panorama is a broad suite of different modules that manages different aspects of public health programming. And the system, there's only one territory that does not have currently these registries, but they've picked different kind of platforms, if you like, to execute them. And I think that if we can connect the dots, then that's an enhancement on what we have now. But it's not because the provinces can't track who they vaccinated and to follow them up with the second dose. That's their job. But this system, because of the complexity of the supply chain and the transportation and making sure that there's good visibility of where doses are, et cetera, I think the platform, as I understand it, but we can provide more information, is to enhance that capability. Normally, you don't get these situations where Pfizer, for example, is delivering to points of use. This is normally, vaccines normally go to the provinces and they get on with executing the program. So there are some special aspects of this. But needless to say that all of this is being tracked right now in meticulous detail, as we have been doing in the dry runs.
Okay, we'll turn to the room. Marika, go ahead.
Hi, Marika Walsh with the Globe and Mail. Minister Anand, I'm wondering if you can explain to Canadians who are seeing our vaccine rollout versus the rollout in the U.S., for example, why in the time that the U.S. is expecting to inoculate a third of their population, we will just be doing around 8% of our population.
Sure, thank you so much. I want to take you back to August and July when we were negotiating these agreements, and we were indeed among the very first countries to sign agreements with Moderna and Pfizer, for example, and then we put into place very rapidly 7 agreements for up to 414 million doses for this country. The highest number of doses per capita of any country in the world, which I think we should all remember is the case. At that point, we were not sure, in fact, no one was sure, when a vaccine would be discovered as a viable technology and when Health Canada would thereafter be able to provide approval to that vaccine. And as a result, what we put in place were windows of delivery in Q1, Q2, Q3, and Q4 of 2021 on the basis of the estimated time frame for the development of a vaccine and Health Canada approval. The manufacturing of these vaccines, as you know, is occurring outside this country. So in addition to those provisions in our contracts, we also ensured to have a diverse range of manufacturing sites around the world from which we could obtain these vaccines. That was an extremely complicated process. And now that we see Health Canada moving so quickly with the approval process, we are attempting, and successfully so, to move up the delivery dates of the vaccines that indeed are being produced outside of this country. So we are not only at the beginning of the line, the EU is still moving to approve Pfizer, and I believe that's expected to come next week. So we are at the front of the line in terms of countries, and we are actually making sure that Canadians and the inoculation process that is occurring here is actually very well positioned in terms of Canadians' access to vaccines.
I guess that's where my confusion is, though, because the line from your government is that Canada is the best positioned in the world. We have options for more than 400 million vaccines, but we're seeing that we are going to be after others. So is it that we just bet on the wrong quarter in 2020, or can you just explain why it is that it comes later in the year next year?
Well, by the end of 2021 or September 2021, we expect all Canadians to be able to be vaccinated if they choose to do so. And indeed, we are among the first countries to actually undertake our vaccination process. So it's not a line per se, it is actually the truth. The other point that I want to mention is that the mass production of vaccines is occurring outside of our borders. And so our access to these vaccines takes into account that fact. And I want to remind the room that we actually are the first country to have an agreement with AstraZeneca where there is not domestic biomanufacturing of vaccines. And so we're working with a number of complicated variables here. And in my estimation, we are continuing to ensure that vaccines arrive in this country in a very expeditious manner with systems put in place with experts like Major General Denis Fortin. Thank you.
Okay, we'll take one last question from the room.
Laurence Martin de Radio-Canada. Moi, je voudrais juste clarifier là, pour les 6
I would
millions
like
de
to clarify
doses
for
qui
the
vont
6
arriver
million
d'ici
doses that
la
will
fin du mois
arrive
de
between
mars.
now and
Vous
the
avez
end of
dit, il y en a
March.
4 millions
You
de
said that
Pfizer,
4 million are
2
from
millions de
Pfizer,
Moderna.
2 million from Moderna.
Moderna, ça va juste aller au territoire. Les
Moderna will
provinces
go
vont avoir un
only to
mélange
the
de
territories.
Pfizer
The
et de
provinces will
Moderna.
receive a mix
Mais on
of
s'entend
Pfizer
que
and
pour ces
Moderna.
6 millions de
So for
doses, là,
these
et ça,
6
ça
million
inclut
doses,
les
and
nouvelles
this
doses de Moderna,
includes new
ça va
Moderna
être
doses.
distribué
So
au
this will
prorata
be
de la
distributed
population.
on a per
Au
capita
total, là, les 6
basis.
millions, ça va être au prorata.
It will a per capita allocation?
J'aimerais
Yes.
ça vous entendre,
I would like to hear
Monsieur
you
New,
speak, Mr.
peut-être
New,
sur
on
la question de la désinformation. J'ai posé la question à M.
issue
Trudeau
of
par rapport à
disinformation.
ça.
I asked
Mais
the
vous, vous êtes à
question
la
of
santé
Mr.
publique.
Trudeau, but you work at
Est-ce
public health.
que ça vous préoccupe
Are you
et est-ce que vous
concerned?
pensez qu'il faut faire
And do you
plus que ce
think
qu'on
that
fait?
we
Est-ce que vous
should do
pensez qu'on est
more?
rendu? Parce
Do you
que
think,
là, on entend
because
plein de
right now
Canadiens
we
qui ne
hear a
veulent
lot
pas
of
se faire vacciner.
Canadians say
Vous,
that they
vous
don't want to
battez
get
pour que
a
les gens se
vaccine,
fassent
and you're
vacciner.
fighting for
Est-ce que vous
people to
pensez
get a
qu'il est temps de
vaccine.
faire, je sais
Do
pas,
you
une
think
campagne
that you should have
publicitaire
an ad campaign or
pour
a
que les
public
gens se fassent
awareness
vacciner?
campaign so that people will get the vaccine?
Merci pour la question. Oui,
Answer. Thank
je
you for the
pense qu'il y a
question.
plusieurs composants.
I think that there are many components to this.
Une campagne pour
And
rassurer,
especially when we
aussi
talk
pour
about a campaign,
augmenter la
to
confiance
reassure
des
people and to
Canadiens
increase
pour la vaccination.
the
Je
level of
pense
trust in a
qu'une première
vaccine.
étape très
I think that a
importante, on
very
a déjà
important first
parlé de
step is
ça
something that
plusieurs
we've
fois,
already spoken
c'est
about, is
rassurer les Canadiens.
to
On
reassure
a un des
Canadians.
systèmes réglementaires
We have
un des meilleurs du monde.
one of the most stringent regulatory
donc n'importe
approval
quel
processes in
vaccin
the world.
homologué au
So
Canada,
any
c'est sûr,
vaccine that is
c'est
approved
sûr
in
et
Canada,
efficace. Ça,
we know
sans
that it
question.
is safe and
Avec ça comme une
effective.
première étape,
Without a question.
maintenant avec la logistique,
Now,
tout ça, c'est vraiment,
with
d'après moi,
logistics,
c'est vraiment
I
wow.
think
Ça, c'est
that,
quelle histoire. On a commencé
It's
avec la
amazing because
vaccination des
we
personnes
have
hier.
begun
Pour moi aussi,
vaccinating
c'est
people
très
yesterday,
important.
and I
Les
think
médias
it's really
font une
important.
grande partie
And the media
des
are
bonnes
part of
nouvelles,
this. It's a good
montrer,
news
être
story
des témoins
to show
témoins
people
pour les expériences des premières
who can
personnes,
speak
aussi des entrevues.
to
J'ai
their own
entendu
experience, and I heard interviews
les aînés aussi, les
seniors
travailleurs de la santé, c'est wow.
and healthcare
Moi,
workers
je fais
that got
mon
a
part,
vaccine,
je suis fier.
they feel
C'est vraiment
very
bon
excited.
pour tout
There's
le
a
monde,
wow
pour moi,
factor.
pour ma
They
famille,
say, I've done
pour
the
mes
best thing
patients,
for
tout ça.
myself,
Ça,
for my
c'est
patients,
important.
for my
Ça, c'est
family.
deuxième
This
étape.
is very important.
Pour
It's
moi
a second
aussi,
step.
une autre étape
And
très
I think that
importante,
there's also
c'est
another
aussi,
very
on
important
sait que
step. We know
les
that
fournisseurs de la santé, comme les médecins,
healthcare providers, such as doctors, are a dependable source of information for their patients, and they are credible.
Donc, pour nous autres, c'est très
For
important,
us, it's
c'est de leur
extremely
fournir avec
important
les
to
outils,
provide
les
them the information
informations pour augmenter leur
in order
confiance,
to
pour
increase
avoir
their
une bonne
trust level
conversation
so
avec
that
leurs
they can have a
patients.
conversation
On a
with their
déjà commencé
patients.
avec les
We've
webinaires.
already
Je pense que c'est
begun
avec l'Ami
with
Canada.
webinars, I think.
Je pense que c'était hier en
I
anglais,
think
c'est même
this
aujourd'hui,
was
je pense, en français.
available
On
in
va
English yesterday
continuer,
and French
parce que
today, and
c'est
we will
très
continue
important
with this. It's very
utiliser
important
le réseau des
to use
fournisseurs de
the
la santé à
network of
travers le
healthcare
pays. Ça, c'est
providers
une
throughout the
troisième
country.
étape.
This is the third step.
C'est sûr aussi avec une campagne aussi publicitaire
With an
pour
ad
donner
campaign,
l'information
to
canadienne.
provide
Il
Canadians
faut
with
utiliser
information,
plusieurs
we
moyens.
also have to
Je sais,
use
moi,
different
personnellement, comme les points de
means.
presse comme ça, c'est pour une
Press
certaine
conferences
communauté
such as
démographique,
these
peut-être les
are
parents, les personnes plus vieux.
are for some,
Mais mes enfants,
some
je sais, ils
Canadians,
n'écoutent pas
perhaps
ils regardent
older
pas les
Canadians.
points de
I can
presse.
tell you that
Donc, il faut
my
peut-être
children are not watching
utiliser
these
des
press
autres moyens comme
conferences,
YouTube
so
ou
other
TikTok
means
ou
might
je ne sais pas
be
ça.
used,
Donc, c'est
TikTok or
quelque chose
YouTube.
avec
I'm not
nos
sure.
experts de
So we have
communication,
to
le risque,
use
c'est quelque chose aussi, une autre
our communications experts to find different ways to reach different populations.
diriger. Et
Vous considérez en ce moment?
oui,
Que,
oui,
Are you
oui, on a
considering
déjà
this?
fait.
Yes, of
moi-même,
course.
en mois de, je pense, avril,
Even in
j'ai
April,
fait quelques vidéos YouTube
I did a few
avec,
YouTube
comme on dit en
videos
anglais, des
with
influencers. Et apparemment,
influencers.
je sais,
And
je suis pas
apparently,
un
I don't
YouTube
know,
star, mais
But
Une
I'm not a
vidéo a
YouTube
plus
star,
que
but
200 000 de vues. C'est
one
wow,
of
c'est
them
quelque chose.
has over
Même mes
200,000
enfants
views,
disent,
and
oui,
even
mais
my
un
children
autre ami
said,
t'as
wow,
vu
my friend saw
à
you
YouTube.
on
Ça,
YouTube.
c'est quelque
So
chose à
this
part
is,
ça, mais
this is something
on va continuer avec
else, but
peut-être des efforts comme ça.
we will
Et
continue with
finalement,
our
je pense
efforts.
aussi,
And
c'est aussi important pour
I
le grand
also think
public.
it's important
Je
for the
pense
public
que
at large.
si les personnes continuent à
If
utiliser
people
l'Internet,
continue to
il faut
use the
faire
Internet,
ça avec une certaine prudence.
that has to be done in a more careful
Comment
way.
dire, comment dire, je sais pas même en anglais, c'est il faut être prudent, mais
We
aussi
have to
c'est, hey,
be
c'est
careful,
quoi le
but
site
also to say,
je
okay,
regarde maintenant? Est-ce que c'est un
people
site
have
fiable? Est-ce que
to
c'est de
be
l'Agence de la
discerning
santé publique,
to
Santé
see
Canada, c'est l'OMS, CDC?
where are
Ou
they
est-ce
receiving their
peut-être quelqu'un que je connais
information?
pas, peut-être
Is it
on
somebody
sait
that
pas,
they
peut-être
don't
c'est
know,
quelqu'un dans le
someone with
sous-sol.
no credentials? It can be someone in their
Donc, c'est
basement.
aussi
Or
une
is it coming
question
from
aussi
public
d'un peu de
health or
responsabilité.
the
C'est pas
WHO? So
comme
people
dire,
have
je
to
sais pas
assume
en
a certain
français,
level
mais
of
un clickbait,
responsibility.
c'est wow,
There's
une
a lot
histoire,
of
quelque chose
clickbait
vraiment
things on the
provocant. Non.
Internet.
Pourquoi
But no, that's
on
not
fait
what
toujours tout de suite à cliquer pour partager avec les amis? Ça, c'est
people
quelque
are
chose
clicking
d'intéressant.
things
Non,
and they're sending
ça
it to their
continue à
friends, but
propager
no,
des
this
informations.
just
Donc, je
spreads
pense que
disinformation.
toujours
So
des rôles
I
pour le
think that
gouvernement,
there's a role to be played by the
tout ça, mais
government,
c'est aussi une
but
responsabilité,
we
je
have a
pense, pour
responsibility.
le
We
grand
all have a
public. Je pense
responsibility
ensemble, on va
to be
réussir.
informed, and I think that we
Merci.
will
C'est la
succeed
fin de la
together.
conférence de presse.
That's all for the press conference.
About how high transmission has been recently, and we are heading into Christmas. So when we are talking about messaging and reaching different people, is it time to change the messaging? Is limiting your contacts working?
So I think everything has to be sort of done at the same time. So individual actions are actually really important, but at the same time, public health and governments also have to do the part. It's a bit of a combination of both. So I think individual behavior is a very difficult thing to sort of pull people together to make sure they stay on track. We've heard, we've been in this for months, and people are, Christmas is a difficult time. People want to connect with families, but we're asking people to connect in safer ways. But as you've seen with the escalation in cases, provinces and also municipalities are having to put down extra measures. They're more restrictive. It's not something that they want to do. And they've tried balancing acts of keeping certain things open and keeping schools open, etc. But that is not really slowing things down. We've seen provinces such as Manitoba that enacted more restrictive measures, and they are beginning to level up. I think the critical indicator that has spurred people, different levels of government on the ground into these further measures is the hospitalizations and the ICU admission rates. So people have questioned, well, if there's lots of cases and they're mild, why are we, restricting society in this way? And it's a really difficult question. But when you see hospitals getting filled and healthcare workers completely exhausted trying to maintain the system, that is really difficult. You can't manage that anymore. And public health is also on the edge of, they can't trace people anymore. This is community transmission. They've lost track of contacts. They're trying their hardest to do lab testing. So therefore, you can't just rely on individual actions. So these other measures are being put in place. Some of them have increased, these more stringent measures, in the last days. So we are going to have to keep at this to see if that would level off the curve itself. It's really important to do this as we begin the vaccination program. The vaccine, as it starts, is going to be small amounts. That's not going to be enough to extinguish any fires, as it were. And so we need to continue. There'll be more and more information about how effective these vaccines are in reducing transmission, for example. We don't know it yet. So for the time being, our message is to everyone to continue. It's not one side or the other, it's the combination. I always say there's public health is called public health for a reason. There's the word public in public health, and it takes both in order for things to actually be effective. So, but there's great hope, with lots of treatments coming on board and vaccines. So I think I'm definitely looking forward to 2021 being a better year.
Tom, one last question.
Ask you, you mapped out for us last week the Pfizer vaccine coming from Belgium to Kentucky to Canada. Can you do the same for the Moderna vaccine? Where is it coming from, what route it's taking, and I guess who's transporting it? And how long as well? How long a process is it?
Yeah, thanks. So I mapped out the route last week for the dry run of the Pfizer product. The exact specifics of the location of the transfer points and the different airports and mode of transportation, I prefer to not disclose this at this time. Provinces and territories will disclose the appropriate level of granularity in terms of locations as they are ready to do so. But the actual routing, I'll keep this at that level for now. But rest assured that we're not trying to hide information. We're trying to ensure that we protect the integrity of the cold chain, and that the appropriate law enforcement, the appropriate agencies can do their job unimpeded with the full knowledge that not all the information is disclosed.
From the States, or if it's coming from Europe? Because I know that the Pfizer stuff was coming from Europe. I don't know if Moderna is coming from there as well.
It comes from different places. It goes through different places. It will get to all Canadians.
Thank you. That's the end of the press conference.
Somebody's already meeting at